And hello, one and all, and welcome to a double review for both this week's edition of NXT and the CWC for August 17th, 2016. This week's edition, we're going to start with NXT, give you my full thoughts and opinions on what took place on the final edition of NXT before NXT TakeOver Brooklyn, airing tomorrow night on the WWE Network, live from the Barclays Center. Overall, this week's edition of NXT, not too much to talk about. There were several things on the show that we will get into. Hideo Itami was in action. There was a 6-women's tag match and a sit-down interview between Joe and Nakamura. But this was more so about building up, highlighting the various matches taking place on the TakeOver Brooklyn card this Saturday. So therefore, we had a lot of very well-done promo packages. So while there was not a whole lot to offer in terms of fresh content on NXT, this was more so of a preview episode for the card on Saturday. But there was some things to talk about, and we are going to get into that right now. So we kicked off this week's edition of NXT with Hideo Itami returning in action once again against Mustafa Ali. This was all about showcasing Hideo's quickness, his intensity. I really like the intensity that Hideo has brought since he has returned to NXT. Thought this was a good showcase for him. Ali really bumped around for Itami. Itami hit a nice baseball slide on Ali. He also hit the Kenta combo, and this caused Ali to tumble to the corner. And he hit the knee for the win right to the head of Ali. So Hideo once again looking strong. It's kind of disappointing that he isn't on the TakeOver card, but I fully expect him to be on the next TakeOver special. So the crowd was behind Itami. I'm really digging him in this second run. Hopefully, he stays injury free. And a showdown I would like to see is if Nakamura walks out as NXT champion. I would love to see Hideo versus Nakamura for the NXT Heavyweight Championship. That would be a really, really good feud. So good stuff from Hideo. Like I said, we had video packages. These were really well done. I just love the infusion of kick-ass rock music. Rock music works so much better than the shitty pop songs that WWE uses on the main roster. So, as I can say, this shows who's really running NXT. Triple H, he's obviously a metalhead, rock and roll guy. So he's infusing rock music into these promo packages, clearly for the direction for NXT, whereas the main roster, they use these pop songs, and I'm a rock and roller, so I prefer rock music. It just goes hand in hand with wrestling, so it really helps build up the intensity in these promo packages. So they did one on Bobby Roode and No Way Jose versus Austin Aries, Bayley versus Asuka, highlighting the tag championship bout between Gargano and Ciampa versus the Revival. So this was good stuff all around. We also had an announcement on this show that Ember Moon will be facing Billie Kay in her debut for Ember Moon at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. That should be really fun. I'm looking forward to seeing what Ember Moon has to offer, and it should be a good debut for her. Billie Kay's somebody... glad she's getting the opportunity. Like I said, she can become one of the future faces, definitely down the line for the NXT Women's Division. So, speaking of the NXT Women's Division, we had 6 women's tag team action. We had Carmella, Liv Morgan, and Nikki Glenn-Cross versus Alexa Bliss, Diarra Bernardo, hope I got that right, and Mandy Rose. This was solid women's action. It was a way to spotlight, some of the new up-and-comers in the women's division, while also infusing several veterans from NXT past who have now been called up to the main roster, such as Carmella and Alexa Bliss. So this was a good showcase for all 6 of these women involved. Eventually, the finish came down to Carmella and Bliss. Eventually, Carmella was able to hit a nice Hurricane Rana, that was on Rose. It came down to Rose and Carmella. And then towards the end of the match here, Carmella was able to reverse a jackknife pin on that Rose attempted on her. And then Carmella hit the Code of Silence, which I really like as her finisher for the tap-out submission victory. So Carmella, Liv Morgan, and Nikki Glenn-Cross stand tall. And then we finally had the backstage sit-down interview between Samoa Joe and Shinsuke Nakamura. This was good stuff all around. Joe just being the the arrogant, fired-up champion, saying how he has been disrespected time and time again, specifically by General Manager William Regal, how Regal, didn't even consult him when announcing his opponent for NXT TakeOver back to Brooklyn. And I just really liked how Nakamura was pretty much blowing Joe off here. I mean, he really didn't seem threatened or intimidated by what Joe had to say. And, Joe questions whether Nakamura is taking this seriously at all. And Nakamura says that he is taking this seriously, but his style is to be calm. And Joe says that he knows Nakamura very well. Their paths have crossed before. And Nakamura pretty much says, no, I actually don't remember that at all. And Saxton says Joe respects Nakamura. Joe says that he respects what Nakamura has done, but that's pretty much it. And Nakamura likewise has the same amount of respect for Joe. And Joe then says, Nakamura, you're going to respect me this Saturday in Brooklyn. And then Joe and Nakamura almost come to blows. There's security around the interview area, and then they separate Joe and Nakamura and escort them out of the interview segment. So that's how we ended this week's edition of NXT. It was a C show. But like I said, this episode really didn't add too much new into heading into TakeOver Brooklyn. We did get the announcement for Ember Moon's opponent. We saw Hideo in action. 6 women's tag action, and the sit-down interview between Joe and Nakamura. But, that's my thoughts on this week's edition of NXT. Now, I am looking forward to also reviewing this week's edition of the Cruiserweight Classic. I thought this was another great edition of the CWC. Certainly didn't top last week's edition. Last week saw the great match between Cedric Alexander and Kota Ibushi. But you know what? I also thought there were a number of good things on this week's edition of the CWC. We had 3 contests, and I all thought they were, for the most part, good matches all around. We saw Ho-Ho Lun, and he was in action against Noam Dar. We saw the Brian Kendrick in action with Tony Nese, and we saw Tokugawa versus Jack Gallagher. My favorite match of the night was Jack Gallagher versus Tokugawa. This was a really good match. Tokugawa bringing the prowess, the intensity, the fire, and Jack Gallagher always able to find a way to counter out of Tokugawa's moves, really focusing the attack on the knee, really working over that injured leg that really crippled Tokugawa towards the middle part of this match. I was really pulling for Jack Gallagher to come out with the win here. He was slowly becoming one of my favorites to watch in the Cruiserweight Classic, just with the way that he's able to work and maneuver out of holds. It's something that you really don't see, and he really has a refined style, as Daniel Bryan was putting over very well on commentary. He is clearly a fan of Jack Gallagher. I didn't know about him before the CWC, but I really, really became a fan once I saw what he had to offer throughout the first 2 rounds of this tournament. And I have to say, Tokugawa and Gallagher, they went out there. They had a really, really good match to kick off this week's edition of the CWC. Really nice suplexes hit by Tokugawa. And that's how he got his victory. He hit a German suplex with the bridge to follow up the victory. So it was disappointing to see Jack Gallagher not walk out the victor. But he put up a hell of a fight, and I'm sure we will be seeing him on the Cruiserweight division when it launches on Raw later on in September. So good match. Probably my match of the night by far on the CWC. We then had Noam Dar versus Ho-Ho Lun. It was definitely a better outing for Dar. I did not enjoy his match in the first round. I felt the weakest of all the first round matches. But I thought he had a better showing in this match. The crowd seemed to be getting behind him. And, Lun was good in this match as well, but he was just a step or two behind Dar, as Dar was able to attack the back of Ho-Ho Lun and right to the back of the head, and he kicked him, and this eventually forced Lun to tap out to the knee bar. So Dar moving on to the second round of the CWC. And, not a bad match. Definitely, I would say, out of the 3 that I saw here, was probably my least favorite, but I still enjoyed it for what it was. So that was our second match on this week's edition of the CWC. And then my second favorite match of the night was definitely Tony Nese versus the Brian Kendrick. This was good stuff all around. Kendrick, the veteran in the ring, and Tony Nese, with his size of 196 pounds, he was definitely able to maneuver around that ring very well. He was doing backflips and flying over the top rope, and it looked like he might have had Kendrick's number here. And Kendrick was certainly, he fell into many predicaments in this match, such as when Nese was able to hit a very nice springboard moonsault off the top rope, but Kendrick was able to nicely counter into the cross arm breaker, and then Kendrick locked in a Fujiwara armbar, and eventually later on towards the end of the match, Kendrick was able to counter as Nese went up to the top rope for a nice-looking 450 splash, and Kendrick smartly countered out of the way. A nice veteran move, and then he immediately locked in the bully choke, and just like that, Tony Nese tapped out, and the Brian Kendrick advanced. It was really great hearing Daniel Bryan on commentary. He really helped add to this match, knowing Brian Kendrick so well. They both had their first matches against each other in from the Shawn Michaels Training Academy, so their history goes way back. Brian was pulling for Kendrick. He was his pick to win the CWC. That really helped to, advance your interest and caring in this match. Great commentary from Mauro Ranallo and Daniel Bryan, and a great effort from both Brian Kendrick and Tony Nese. So these are the participants that have advanced so far into the CWC. We have Akira Tozawa, Kota Ibushi, Noam Dar, the Brian Kendrick, and Gran Metalik. So those are the participants advancing into the third round. And this is the lineup we have for next week. It's already looking like another solid week for the CWC. We have Lince Dorado versus Rich Swann. That should be good. Johnny Gargano versus TJ Perkins. Really looking forward to that one. And Drew Gulak versus Zack Sabre Jr. So this was a good addition for the CWC. And if I had to give it a grade, I would give it a B+. B+ for the CWC. It is one of my favorite shows to watch. Definitely one of the best shows put out by WWE on a week-in, week-out basis. So those are my thoughts and opinions on the NXT and CWC this week. Let me know down in the comments section below what you guys thought, and I will see you later on today for my NXT TakeOver Brooklyn and SummerSlam predictions video. So thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you guys later on tonight.